An entitled Karen walks into our store at the last possible second, as she then walks down every single aisle of our grocery store, taking as much time as possible in shopping for her items. And despite the fact that she was shopping after hours when we were literally closed, she still refused to hurry up, demanding that we keep the store open until she is finished shopping. And I've truly never been more annoyed by anybody in my life. Here's what happened. Okay, so I was working at a grocery store, and this was some years ago. I was working the late closing shift from 4 p.m. till 11 o'clock p.m., and our store closes at 11. At around 10:50 p.m., a lady with a typical Karen haircut, as well as some purple hair color, walks into the store and grabs a shopping cart, and walks into the opposite end of the store with the meat fridges and the freezers. I start the closing routine, and I don't think much of it. The time hits 11, and I finish my routines, and this lady is still standing there in the exact same spot. So I go to her to tell her the store is closed, but before I even get a single word in, she says to me, "I know the store is closed. I know you want to go home. I've worked in a store before, you know." And I tried responding back to her, but she said to me, "Listen, I've worked in a store before. You always let the customer finish shopping." And then she started rambling incomprehensively. The time then hits 5 past 11, and she finally starts moving, but she was swerving between freezers and not grabbing anything. On the way to the cash register, she suddenly takes a sharp right turn to look at something, and the entire time she is rambling to me about something. But at this point, I was spacing out and just following her to make sure that she leaves the store. Finally, at 11:12, she makes it to the register, and my colleague scans her items. Then she realizes she forgot something and is about to go grab it, but before she does, I say to her, "Oh, don't worry, I'll grab it for you." So I ran off to grab it before she would. I then return with the item, and my colleague scans it through. She then asked us about cigarettes, and for reference, the store uses an electronic safe that you pay for a ticket you scan, and then the item drops like a vending machine. While tapping the screen in front of the register, my colleague explains that whatever cigarettes she wanted, we were completely out of. After that, she lets out a scoff and proceeds to look for her wallet in her purse. After rummaging for what felt like forever, she finds the wallet, pays and packs her stuff in a bag, and heads out for the exit. I follow her so I can lock the door, but she notices some National Day flower bouquets by the exit and is about to stop to look at them when she probably noticed me rolling my eyes, and then she finally left. The time at this point was around 11:23 p.m., and my colleague still needed to finish counting the till. Now, the entire time from when I first walked up to the lady and until she left, she was rambling about stores and how she worked in one, and how she definitely knows how it is, and all this other stuff. But truly, lady, if you know, then please leave and just go home, because your presence is truly a nuisance. When I worked in retail, I literally could not stand when people would do this. They walk in at the last second, and then they have the audacity to stay there for minutes after closing. Like, truly, I get it. Sometimes you can't get to the store until later, but for anybody to come in right when you're closing and then stay past the closing time, like, that is so annoying and so unacceptable. Because seriously, the original poster and the rest of their colleagues most likely worked a long day dealing with idiotic customers like this lady. So the fact that she tried to say, "Oh, I know how it is, I used to work in stores," but then also chooses to take her time and not hurry up, in my opinion, is incredibly frustrating and very rude. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. For the first time ever, the cops in my mall actually did something amazing, as I watched them take down a shoplifter in a way that I will never forget. Here's what happened. Okay, so I used to be a manager for a fairly large CD and DVD store back in 2010, and this store was right next to an anchor store. And for those who don't know, the anchor stores are the very large stores at the ends of the mall. Our store took up about the same amount of space of about 3 to 4 small stores in the mall and had an entirely glass front, minus 2 large open doors that had the slide-down grates for closing. The glass front gave us a perfect view of what was going on in the mall when it was slow, which was the case on this particular Sunday evening about 30 minutes before closing. I generally set myself up at the front of the store, sorting new product on a cart and looking outward into the mall. That way I can greet anybody who might come inside. My employees were finishing up closing duties, so we could close the registers and get out the door as fast as possible. Now, this particular mall had the usual security guards, who tended to be the guys who fell into 2 different categories. Category A were the young guys who really wanted to be cops, but probably failed because of psychological evaluations and were a little bit too excited to catch shoplifters. And Category B were the older guys, who probably used to be cops and just wanted everything to be safe for everyone in the mall. And on weekends, we had a few cops that patrolled the mall. As employees, we did occasionally need to call security, and we had good relationships with the security teams, as well as the loss prevention team at the anchor store right next to us. We also used to think that the cops that pulled skilled mall patrol detail were probably just bad at their jobs. But oh, how silly we were to think that. As I was sorting CDs and hoping for a fast exit that night, all of a sudden, I saw a woman with a stroller racing out of the Anchor store just as fast as she could. But quickly in pursuit was one of the cops, who we will call Bob for the sake of the story, who is one of our favorite loss prevention guys from this Anchor store. Before I could even yell back for my employees to see the show, this incident really popped off in a way that I didn't expect. This cop actually made a flying tackle on the woman. He landed on her back and slid with her almost 10 feet across the nicely waxed tiles, all while the stroller went flying, and he had both her hands behind her back and handcuffed before the two of them slid to a stop. Now, before anybody worries, the stroller crashed and spilled all of its contents with not a baby in sight, but instead it was probably a few $1,000s worth of prom dresses and jewelry, which also slid across the nicely waxed tiles. Bob skidded to a stop by the stroller and began collecting the items, and apparently sorting through the items to determine which ones were owned by the Anchor store and which were probably the property of other stores that she had been stealing from, just so they could be returned. Eventually, one of the young mall security guards strolled up from the other direction. He saluted me and said, "It's okay, we've got it taken care of." And I'm honestly still impressed because for the first time, the cops in our mall actually did something that was quite amazing. Yeah, that's really cool when you see someone do their job and they do it well. I know I've worked at malls before, and trust me, some of these security people absolutely suck at their job. They're there just for a paycheck and they don't actually care if anything goes wrong. But these guys were not that. Like, these guys were the John Wicks of like mall cops. And I really think that it's cool you got to see that in action, because I know if I was in your shoes, I would have a lot more confidence in these guys actually getting things done. My wife refuses to take her food allergies seriously, resulting in us constantly going to the hospital from having a negative reaction. But after this last incident, I finally had my breaking point, and I decided that I'm gonna kick my wife out of the house for a few days so that she can finally get it through her head that this is serious and that this is something that I need her to step up on. Here's what happened. Okay, so last night, my wife came home from work and pulled out a container of something I wasn't familiar with, and then she sat down to eat it. She works at a grocery store, so I normally don't think too much about it, but when I got a whiff of it, it smelled like crab salad. Now, for context, my wife has a pretty intense allergy to green and red onions, but she is fine with yellow and white onions. Now, in America, we do have ingredients listed on the package, which is required by law. However, companies are allowed to be vague with certain ingredients, and onions are one of those. Normally, if I spot onions listed as an ingredient, then it is a hard pass for me. I don't even chance it. But my wife, however, doesn't do this. Now, back to last night. I got up and asked to see the container, which was half gone at this point, and I read the ingredients. And wouldn't you know it, onions were listed plain as day towards the top of the ingredients. I asked her if she'd bothered to read the ingredients, and she said that she did, but she assumed that they were the safe ones. At this point, I grabbed the EpiPen from her purse, and I kept it close by. Now, I was upset at her because I used to work in a kitchen, and I know well that green onions and seafood are almost inseparable in those salads. But I kept a calm demeanor and I just watched her. Well, within a few minutes, she started having a reaction. At first, I wanted to give her the EpiPen because she had eaten so much of it, but she refused and said she would just take some Benadryl and lie down on the couch. Eventually, though, she needed to be given the EpiPen, and I drove her to the hospital. And it's important to keep in mind, this is taking place at midnight and I have work at 8 o'clock in the morning. We get to the ER and they admit her. They tell me that she needs to stay overnight for observation because of how severe her reaction is. And I then talk to my wife about it. We know the staff here pretty well, and I know she is in good hands, so I check with her to see if she would be okay if I went home to get some sleep before work. Now, she said it would be totally fine. However, as I was leaving, I chose to call her mom and ask if my wife could spend the next couple of days at her house. You see, I was furious with her at this moment because I felt like I'm the only one who takes the allergies seriously, and I am not the only one who will literally die if I eat the wrong onions. And this isn't the first time that she's been careless and ended up needing to go to the hospital because she had a reaction. There have been many times before where she ate first and asked questions later, and it frustrates me to no end that she doesn't take it seriously enough to take just a few moments to read the ingredients and just avoid onions that she cannot plainly identify. So, since I wasn't getting through to her, and the hospital visits seemed to be ignored as well, I decided that making her stay at my mother's for a few days might send the message. I got home and packed her a suitcase for the next few days, and when I got the call that she was being discharged at 7 this morning, I picked her up and I drove her to her mom's house. I told her as I was dropping her off that this wasn't permanent, but I needed a couple days to cool down, and she needed to be monitored anyways since she just got out of the hospital. So this was the best course of action. Well, when I did this, she cried a lot. She begged me me to take her home instead, but I refused to budge. Her mom brought her inside, and I told her that I would be blocking my wife's calls for the day while at work. So if there was an emergency, then her mom would have to be the one to get a hold of me. Her mom agreed with me and told me that this was probably the best idea since she was also just as frustrated with her daughter, as she seemed to not take any of this seriously. So here I am at work feeling like I might be overreacting by kicking her out for the next few days. So am I at fault in this situation? What should I do? No, I don't think you're overreacting in the slightest. Your wife is literally not taking care of herself. She's being careless and reckless in what she's eating, and that is not only incredibly irresponsible, but not fair for you. Like for reference, this lady is in her 30s. She is more than old enough to read the ingredients on a listing of some kind of food, and from the sounds of it, this is a life-threatening allergy. So why would she not be more attentive to what she should and shouldn't eat? Like, this is just careless, reckless, and incredibly irresponsible. And the fact that she's not taking care of herself in this way is just so disappointing. So no, you're not overreacting by kicking her out, because this is a message that she needs to take seriously. Because one day she's going to be by herself and this is going to happen. And I'm willing to assume that the worst would happen to her if you weren't around to try and save her life. Am I the jerk for changing my name and not telling my father about it? Especially since my father and I shared the same name. Because after spending a lifetime of dealing with my lousy father, I decided that I don't want his name attached to me any longer. And at this point, I really don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out, I was named after my father. I have a sister that is 11 months older than me, and my father walked out when I was only 6 months old. He popped up every once in a while until he came to live with us, and then he left again when my mom got sick, and then started raising someone else's children. He was a real parent to them, despite being the whole children are meant to be seen and not heard type of person. My sister and I were included in things with the other kids at the request of my stepmother, but it still felt like he wasn't my dad. I accepted the other children as extra siblings, and they accepted me and my sister as well. My stepmother cared for us as her own when we visited, and I loved them all. Well, my father ended up leaving again and getting with a different woman, and still for years never made an attempt to mend things with me. He would call to tell me happy birthday, but never on my birthday, and I never corrected him either. I felt like I shouldn't have to correct him because he was there when I was born. My sister was the one who reached out to him and has forgiven him and allows him to be in my niece and nephew's lives. Now, I don't have kids yet, but I don't want him around me or my family. I really feel like he doesn't deserve it. In recent conversation, he asked if I was going to continue the carrying of our name, and I just laughed a bit and I said, oh, I don't know, maybe. But on the inside, I felt very uncomfortable about that question, and I actually brought it up to my wife. She feels the same way that I do. She knows everything about my experiences with him and feels that he shouldn't have a chance to be a good grandfather to make up for being a lousy father. He put me through so much as a kid, and as much as I wanted him to go away, my mom wanted us to know him and to allow him to be a part of our lives. She didn't want us to grow up without a dad or calling someone else dad. She didn't know about any of what he did until I told her when I was 27 years old. She asked why I didn't like talking to him, and I told her everything that happened while she was at the doctor and dialysis. Well, she was mortified and called him up and yelled at him for an hour, but he actually just told her that if she wanted him to parent us in a certain way, then she's the one who should have said so. I thought a lot about what he had asked, and I came to the conclusion that I did not want to continue the name. I didn't want to pass on to my son the burden that is my father, and I also didn't want the name myself. So I went and I got it changed, and I never planned on telling my father. But when I brought it up to my sister, she got mad and started laying into me, yelling and asking how I could be so selfish and how it would make our father feel when he finds out. But I yelled back at her, asking if she remembered what he had put us through as kids. After getting off the phone with her, I thought about what she said, and now I feel like I've made a mistake. So am I the jerk for changing my name and not telling my dad about it? Because right now, I really don't know what to do. No, I don't think you're the jerk at all. Your dad doesn't sound like a winner in the slightest, and it really seems like he not only neglected you, but he's also not sorry that he did it. Like seriously, what kind of response was that to your mom? He said to her, oh yeah, if you wanted me to raise them a certain way, then you should have said something. But like seriously, wouldn't loving your kids be something that you would do like automatically? This guy literally abandoned you multiple times. He was a lousy father, and now he wants you to continue his name for selfish reasons. So no, in my opinion, I don't think you're the jerk for changing your name, because at the end of the day, this is your decision and not his. Am I the jerk for refusing to pay my part of an apartment for a vacation that I couldn't go on? Because right now, my friends, despite having 2 months notice to change their reservations, are literally blaming me for having to pay hundreds of dollars extra per person just to stay in their accommodation. And at this point, I'm so frustrated that that I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. I'm a 23-year-old female, and back in July, I was supposed to take a trip to Ibiza with my friends. This trip had been planned since February of this year, and the entire time that it was planned, I felt kind of left out. It really looked like they were trying to get me to not go, either by booking the most expensive flights or by not listening to anything I had to say. And this is despite the fact that I'm the only one who speaks Spanish, as well as the only one who understood the descriptions and locations of the hotels and apartments they were looking at. We finally decided on an apartment, which wasn't cheap, but it was doable, and paid for the flight. It's important to note that we didn't have to pay in advance, and there was no cancellation fees until 4 days before departure, and this was booked using one of my friend's accounts. Fast forward to April, and I got a call back for a job I really wanted, and I was due to start working on May 3rd. So this meant I was probably unable to attend this summer trip. So I told my friends in advance that there was the possibility I couldn't go. Well, as soon as I started working my job, my manager confirmed that I would not be able to mature enough vacation days to be able to go. So I told my friends. I offered to help them find someone to replace me and told them to text me if they needed anything, such as finding a new place to stay, as we could cancel the booking and not pay any fees. Now, when I said this to all of them, none of them looked or acted disappointed that I couldn't go. In fact, they didn't even answer my text message. Fast forward to July 1st, which is the day the free cancellation expired. My friends finally texted me saying they tried to ask around a bit, but no one could join them and take my place. So, thinking that they cared for me and understood my situation, I offered to try and help with the money for the apartment, which I know was a mistake on my part, but I honestly thought they would have done the same for me if I was in their situation. Well, they asked me to pay for the entirety of my share, which I did not find right, as I had given them 2 months notice. Plus, we did not have to give any deposit, and they had 2 months to cancel and book somewhere else. In the end, they ended up paying 100 extra euros per person for the apartment. They then texted me in late August just to tell me how I had broken an almost 10-year-old friendship and that I didn't have any respect for their money. After that, I completely cut ties with them, but some of our old friend group sided with them and keeps telling me that I'm the jerk and that it was my responsibility to help them out. So seriously, am I at fault in this situation? Because right now, I really don't know what to do. No, you're not the jerk here. These people suck. You mean to tell me that your friends were so lazy that they didn't think to cancel the booking ahead of time and try to find anything else after you told them you couldn't go? Seriously, what is going on right now? That is so stupid, it's not even funny. And you even offered to help them out. You told them explicitly, hey, I'll help you find someone to replace my spot if you really want me to, while even offering to help them find another place to stay, since it would be extra for them to stay there without your involvement. But what do they do instead? Oh, I don't know. They try to pin this on you and be like, wow, I can't believe you did this. We have to pay extra now and it's your fault. But it's no, stupid, this is your fault. These people didn't take the initiative to get any of this done. And because of that, they're trying to use you as a scapegoat for some stupid reason. So no, you're definitely not the jerk, because this is just insane behavior. And if your friends really want to cut you off because of their dumb decisions, then honestly, it's probably for the best, because these supposed friends don't sound like very good people in the first place. Am I the jerk for not letting my parents stay in my college accommodation after they basically invited themselves over without asking me first? Because right now, after a big fight, I'm starting to feel really guilty, and at this point, I don't know what to do. Okay, so I go to college in a city that's relatively close by, and during the week I stay in a house with 4 others, and then I come home for the weekends. My parents pay for my rent and give me a bit of spending money for the week. I also have a job, so they don't give me all of my spending money. When I started college a few months ago, my mom suggested that they could stay in my house if they wanted to visit my city that I'm staying in, instead of paying for a hotel for the weekend. Now, for reference, I don't live in a particularly nice city, so not having to pay for a hotel is pretty much the only attraction. Well, I made it clear back then that I was not okay with that. I didn't say it to them, but my main reason for this is that I don't want them in my bed. Fast forward to today, when my mom told me that she booked a dinner in a restaurant in my city for a couple of weekends from now, and that she planned for her and my dad to stay in my house. I reminded her that I said I wasn't okay with that, and she said that she thought I would change my mind by now. Now, I think that assuming that without asking me first is a pretty entitled thing to do, and making the booking without asking me is completely her own fault. The list of reasons why I wouldn't want them there has actually grown since the last time we talked about it. Like I said, I don't want them in my bed, but also at least one of my roommates stays in the house some weekends, and I don't really want them interacting. Also, the walls are thin, and my bed squeaks a lot, which brings me back to the first point. Also, I don't want them looking through my fridge and seeing how little food I have, as they've been worried that I haven't been eating enough. enough, which is kind of true. I told them that I always eat a good breakfast, when most days I don't eat breakfast at all. And trust me, they're going to be nagging me about this for the next 4 years. Also, I just feel that giving them unrestricted access to the house is an invasion of mine and all of my roommates' privacy, even though we have nothing to hide. Anyways, we had a big fight about it, and then a little while later, my mom told me that if it bothers me that much, then they didn't have to go away for the weekend, and they would just cancel the dinner reservation and choose to go out in our hometown instead, which now I kind of feel bad about. But at the same time, I feel that I have valid reasons for not wanting them to stay in my house. And if they weren't paying my rent, I don't think they would have much of an argument to stay there at all. But in this case, they do, so that is a pretty big point in their favor. So am I at fault here? Because right now, I am still incredibly annoyed. Now, I don't think you're the jerk at all, because the way your parents are acting is so weird. First of all, if they really wanted to stay with you, then they should have asked you first instead of being like, oh yeah, we're coming over on this one weekend. I hope you're ready for us, and of course we didn't ask. Why would we? It's like, seriously, what are we doing right now? This is not fair for you in the slightest, because it's putting you in a weird spot. If you lived alone, I might be a little more understanding of them being like, hey, I'm coming by, but it's the fact that you have roommates. Like, that alone makes this incredibly inappropriate. So no, you are not the jerk in this situation, because the way your parents are acting, in my opinion, is completely unacceptable. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.